All right, welcome to the Big Kid Show, the notorious B to the I to the G Kid Show. I am your host, Big Nick, and with me, as always, I got two of the Big Kid Elite, which really, when you break it down, ladies and gentlemen, the Big Kid Elite is 3 members strong, and it's the only 3 members that have ever existed in the Big Kid Elite. Everybody else is just one tier below that. Maybe the brothers Drew are one tier, and then Thomas Vector way down the
Thomas
list.
Vector, he's but every week he goes down.
Yeah, the remainder of the research team, as well as the Big Kid listeners out there, tier 3, I guess we would say. But no, we couldn't do the show without all of you beautiful Big Kid listeners out there. Thank you for listening. Thank you for telling your Big Kid friends. You have landed with your 3 favorite Big Kid friends here today for another fantastic episode of the Big Kid Show. Make sure you like, subscribe, and tell everybody who is willing to listen and tolerate you for seconds about this fantastic podcast. All right, what do we got on tap here for you today, Big Kids? Well, it's going to be a little versus mode action. That's right. We're starting off 2025 with a real brouhaha, a fracas at the Big Kid headquarters here, where we are going to be throwing down hardcore. And actually, we will be introducing to all of you out there some people that are truly big kids, as they are all rather large in stature. So we will be talking about a tournament that is probably 30 years, 35 years overdue. Today on Versus Mode, we will be doing a bracket-style single-elimination tournament of the 1980s WWF wrestling greats.
Yeah.
Thank you. Welcome and appreciate your applause. Whether that is applied in the post remains to be seen. All right, here we go. Let's start things off. And as most people know, there are people out there that have a general understanding of these things. As most of those people know, that when you bracket these, usually you have a seeding process, correct? So we do have a 1 through 16 seeds that will be squaring off here today at the Big Kids versus Arena. And naturally, you have the 1 seed squaring off against the 16th seed. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the number 2 seed squaring off with the number 15 seed, with all of the other seeds somewhere in the middle. And by the end of today's show, hopefully we get it done in one show, we will arrive at the greatest 1980s, that's 1 decade, champion of the WWF. Now, for all the big kids out there in listener land, we were tasked with coming up with just 16 of the wrestling greats from the 80s. If your favorite wrestler did not make the cut, please do not publicly shame us or turn your back on the show. That would just be rude. And for the wrestlers that really made most of their hay in the 90s, tune back in for a future show, because we hope to do a 90s WWF wrestling greats versus mode sometime in the near future. So we apologize in advance if your favorite wrestler did not make the cut. The wrestling team. This isn't middle school. It's not the wrestling team.
Thomas Vector's getting in your head.
Yeah. Thomas Vector, the research team, and us 3 big kids, the Big Kid Elite, are the ones who voted on and decided the 16 wrestlers that will compete for the title of Decade's Champion. And it was yours truly that came up with the seedings for each of these professional fighters. So one of the best parts of the show is Sweetwater Mark and your good friend, Mr. B. They do not know who will be facing one another in the first round of today's matchups. All right, single elimination here, fellas. Let's start at the top, and let's go with the 1 seed versus the 16 seed. In our first fight for round 1, let me introduce to you the 16 seed. Known as the Iron Sheik, he is the only Iranian-born WWF champion to date. His real name is, I'm going to give this a shot, Hussein Khosrow Ali Vazari. Nailed it. He competed for a spot on the Iranian Olympic team at the 1968 Summer Olympics in Mexico City. And he was also a bodyguard for the last monarch of Iran. So pretty well to do there. But when fellow Iranian Greco-Roman wrestler mysteriously died, the Iron Sheik fled Iran to the United States, fearing for his life, where he became an assistant coach to the USA wrestling team for the 1972 Olympics. So this dude was a legit wrestler before he got into fake wrestling. The Iron Sheik held the WWF World title briefly in late 1983 and early 1984, then alongside Nikolai Volkov, who I love but will not be featured in today's tournament, was also a tag team champion. The Iron Sheik is billed at 6 foot, 238 pounds of Iranian wrestling fighting madness. All right, here we go. He will be facing arguably one of the most popular WWF wrestling stars of all time, Hulk Hogan. Originally born in Augusta, Georgia, he's a former bass player for several Florida bands, including the once popular Tampa-based band Ruckus. Hogan started wrestling professionally in 1977. That's a true story. They were quite.
That's real? Okay.
Yeah, they were quite successful as well.
Hulk the bass man Hogan.
During his initial run, he was a 5-time WWF champion, with his 1,474-day reign being the longest of the WrestleMania era ever. He is the first wrestler to win consecutive Royal Rumble matches, winning in 1990 and 1991. Spoiler alert, if you haven't watched those yet, Hogan wins. At his match against Andre the Giant on WWF, the main event on February 5th, 1988, still holds the American television viewership record for wrestling with 33 million viewers. That's fantastic.
Wow.
I was watching that night. I was one of the 33 million watching that night. And Hogan is billed at 6 foot 7 inches tall, 302 pounds. Mr. B, you are a street fighting man. Everybody knows it. Everybody says it. Many people are afraid of you.
I'll cut you.
He will cut you. What say you, Iron Sheik versus the Hulk Hogan?
I'm just surprised the Sheik got the 16th seed. I thought he would be a little higher. That's the camel clutch, man.
The camel clutch. That's right.
Camel clutch.
I mean, Hulk Hogan will win.
And has won.
Yeah. I mean, obviously he's the 1 seed for a reason. He's Hulkamania. Once that American music kicks in, shirts are ripping and bodies are flying.
Well, and these matches are for the purpose of today, right? We're going to pretend this is fighting at its pinnacle, real wrestling at its peak. However, usually in these settings, especially during the 80s, for a man representing another country other than the United States, the Iron Sheik, to come in there and wave the Iranian flag, they just don't beat the American hero, do they? You're not selling many tickets that way if the bad guy is beating the American hero. Yeah. Mark, what say you? We got one vote for Mr. B.
And I mean,
from Mr. B for Hulk Hogan.
Anybody who's watched the documentary on Mr. McMahon has probably seen some of the tactics that were used around the Iron Sheik and some of the stuff that was going on around the world, and how they kind of used him to fan the flames a little bit in that regard as well. But these two actually met each other January 23rd, 1984. Yep. And Hulk Hogan escaped the camel clutch to defeat the Sheik and win his first WWF title. So I think that would continue. And you just look at the size difference. You said the Sheik was 6 foot tall?
Correct.
And Hogan's 6'8". I mean, that's like me versus,
Whoa, I didn't know
an
Hogan
NBA
was 6'8".
center.
Yeah, he's billed at 6'8" or 6'7",
6'7",
depending on
6'8",
who you look at.
But 300 pounds, I mean, that's a tough matchup. But I think the wrestling gods would probably side with Hulk anyway. Like you said, when Hulkamania runs wild on you, brother.
Do you guys remember those boots that the Iron Sheik wore that had like the tips at the front of them?
Yeah.
And he would, on occasion, it was thought that he would put something in those boots because he would, if he got you down on the mat and you were stuck there briefly, you couldn't get up, he would go off to the side and start kicking his boot on the mat of the ring, to suggesting that he's trying to move like a weight or something metal in that boot toward the forward of the boot, so he could, to the toe of it, so he could kick you in the face with some kind of foreign object. I don't think we ever learned what was in the actual boot, or if it was just the theatrics that he was up to. But, you know, you touched on something a little bit there, Mark, with the Iron Sheik. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for the success of the WWF, because I wanted to make sure that I included some of his bio for the beautiful listeners out there, because he was an actual coach for the USA wrestling team, for our Olympic.
Was he really?
Yeah. The 1972 Olympic wrestling, USA Olympic team. So he's actually doing great things for America. And then on top of that, he's doing great things for the WWF by allowing them to make him the poster child of the wrestler that should be hated the most by Americans. And in fact, they had said at one point, when he was so hated, because remember, he would step into the ring with his flag, he would grab the microphone and he would go, "I reign number one, USA," and then he would pretend to spit on the mat. And man, did that upset the people. The people don't want to.
It doesn't fly.
No, it doesn't fly. Yeah. They said that one time at Madison Square Garden, after an event, they had to fake an injury that was so bad that they put him in an actual ambulance with the sirens on to take him out of the building, because there were so many death threats against him. They thought that was the only way that they could safely remove him from the building. So they faked this injury to him. And so he doesn't get the credit I think he deserves for the success of the WWF. And you're right. He put Hogan over the top, as you said there, Mark. And then Hogan goes on to maintain and keep that belt for over 1,000 days, for over 1,400 days. And I think if these two squared off 10 times, I think Hogan wins 10 out of 10 times.
And I'll just say this. I mean, the Iron Sheik was popular well beyond his days in the ring. I mean, he had 600,000 followers on Twitter, and he's definitely
very
a personality. Definitely a personality. So it pinned at the top of his Twitter account, or X account, before he passed away at the age of 81, was, "Take a minute of your day to be nice to someone, you dumb son of a bitch."
Put that on the quote board.
Yeah, that doesn't just sum it up. I mean, put that on the tombstone.
Yeah, I want that on my tombstone.
You know, his final tweet before the Post had announced his death was the Canadian wildfires. Anybody in the U.S., and especially the northern U.S., remembers when like the skies actually got dark because there was so much wildfires in Canada. He put "F the wildfires" in all caps was his last tweet. So yeah, he
truly was a poet. Truly was a poet. The Iron Sheik,
a master in the ring and out.
Yeah. Good fight, good matchup though, nonetheless. In the first round, I think a good billing, a good square off. In the first round, Hogan versus the Sheik. Hulk Hogan advances, and he will face the winner of the 8 and 9 seed matchup that will be unveiled here shortly. But now let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum, to two fellas that are quite a bit bigger than the Iron Sheik, perhaps. First off, let's start with our number 15 seed, and that is a 1. This guy entertained me to great lengths. A 1, Bam Bam Bigelow.
Yes.
Bam Bam.
If anybody remembers this cat, this dude was a handful. Let's say that. But he was the first person that I ever recall in the history of my existence to see a skull tattoo. He's tattooed his skull with the flames. Remember, he had the flames on the top of his head.
I do.
Hey, a fashion statement. It
commitment.
Was. That's
commitment.
His last name really is Bigelow. His birth name is Scott Charles Bigelow. He's from New Jersey, and he is billed at 6'4", 390.
That's a big fella.
That's a
big fella.
Big Mama Jamma, but not as big as this cat. He's facing off against the number 2 seed in our single elimination tournament, Andre.
Oh,
Yep.
the Giant. I mean, the one and only. I mean, he is, when you think of wrestling, it's hard not to think of Andre up there with the likes of The Rock and Hulk Hogan. I mean, he was as big of a superstar physically and worldly, globally as they come. And he was born in France. Anybody that has not there's about 3 documentaries that are all worth watching on Andre the Giant. If you've not seen any of them, I say watch all 3. They are all slightly different than one another, but just the life that he led, it was both sad and accomplished. You know, he was diagnosed at a young age, and actually it was once told to him that he would not live past the age, I believe, of 25 or 26. And thankfully he lived many years beyond that to our entertainment, right? And he was both a movie star and a wrestling star, and just one hell of a cool dude. And sounds like he could drink beer and wine with not just the best of them. He was the best at that. We have Bam Bam Bigelow, Big Mama Jamma, squaring off against the biggest Mama Jamma of wrestling history, Andre the Giant. Mark Sweetwater, Mark, what say you? Now, remember, Bam Bam was agile. For as big as he was, he could move, he could jump, he could fly off the ropes, he could do that little roll move that he would get away from you. So he had quickness, Bam Bam.
He was spry for a 390.
Like an NFL defensive lineman with some agility that could get around and move as needed. This one's tough, man. So when I think of, honestly, both of these guys, I want to toss a throwback game out there that I don't know if you guys will remember or not, but WWF WrestleMania on the old classic NES system.
Yes, sir.
I used to, had Hulk ripping the yellow shirt on the cover of it, and it was made by Acclaim. Dude, I played the snot out of that game. Like I played it all the time. It came out in 89, I want to say. So I was probably 8 years old when it came out. It was almost like a side view of the ring, but it had 2 pictures of the guys in the top, each corner. And it had a lot of the big name wrestlers at that time. But I remember using Bam Bam, fighting Bam Bam and Andre the Giant in that game. Oh man, brings back a lot of memories. But when we talk about in the ring, I love Bam Bam Bigelow. I think he was vastly underrated, even as popular as he was. But I just don't see how he outlasts the Giant. It's Andre the Giant, man. Like, that dude was just a literal freak of nature. And I don't know if there's anybody that could withstand a whole lot from that guy. I guess we'll find out as we go further along here if he makes it, beyond this round. But I got to go Andre the Giant.
Would it help you to know that Bam Bam Bigelow spent a lot of time in juvie as a kid?
Can he carry a shank with him?
That is not a laughing matter when you review the things that the charges that had repeated arrests that he had as a youth. He was a young man. He was, not yet full. Still had the soft spot on his head where it was later replaced with the tattoo flames. All right. Yeah, I'm with you though. Bam Bam Bigelow was one of my favorites on that old wrestling game because of his size and his speed, which in that game, if I recall correctly, most of the guys had a lot of the same maneuvers and moved very similar in that game, but very few guys, as said, had his combined size and speed. Mr. B, your name is Mr. B. Do you go with the triple B, Bam Bam Bigelow versus Andre the Giant?
I gotta go with Andre the Giant. Not only is amazing wrestler, the greatest actor of our generation, Princess Diaries, or whatever. What was he? Is that it?
He was in Princess Bride.
Yeah. Princess Bride.
Hey, little lady.
He was also in the Conan impression.
Ah, yeah.
He played the monster. He was inside that big giant suit.
He's 7'4" and 500 plus pounds. Plus, I just always liked Andre the Giant. Like, he would have been a cool guy just to be like, have 1 or 37 beers with.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
probably could drink you under the table.
You would black out while he was cracking open his 55th beer. Like you would black out around the 17, 18 beer mark, and he would be like, "Why are you drinking light beer?" And he'd be on his 55th beer. In those documentaries, The Giant, there's many different names for him, but like I said, 3 that are worth watching. To see him hold a beer can, you can't even, like, your brain can't comprehend what you're seeing because it looks so incredibly tiny. It looks like when us normal people would consume one of those little, like, what are they, 8-ounce Pepsi cans or 7-Up cans? But yeah, he was absolutely one of my favorite. And I used to love when he would square off against other big behemoths. I would love when they would pair him up with a tag team matchup where he would be with another big guy as his partner. And he certainly did not like and could not stand Big John Studd, who
Big John Studd.
He didn't like Big John Studd because Big John Studd was a self-proclaimed giant. And Andre's like, no, man, no. There's one giant in this entire wrestling federation, and it is I. It will forever be me. I'm with you guys. There's no way that Andre the Giant is not advancing to the second round.
Yeah.
All right. Andre the Giant will square off against the winner of the 7 and 10 seed matchup to be unveiled later. Let's go now back to the other side of our bracket, where the winner of this matchup will square up against Hulk Hogan. In the 8 seed, squaring off against the 9 seed, we have 9 seed is the Big Boss Man.
Big Boss Man.
A one-time real-life corrections officer from Georgia. He began his wrestling career in 1985, joining up with Hakeem the African Dream to form the Twin Towers, who feuded regularly with the Mega Powers, which was Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage. He was also an Intercontinental Champion and a Tag Team Champion, billed at 6'7" tall, 330 pounds. And he had one of the great theme songs of wrestling history titled Hard Times. All right. He's squaring off against the number 8 seed, Sergeant Slaughter. He's a multi-champion across many different wrestling associations and a one-time WWF World Champion. He's from Detroit, Michigan, billed at 6'6" tall, 305 pounds, and he has received the highest honor known to mankind, as he is also a G.I. Joe character.
I mean, that absolutely has to be the top line of his resume.
Right. Yes, I mean, that is 2 steps above U.S. President. Yes. G.I. Joe character. Very few people have achieved such greatness. Number 9 seed, the Big Boss Man, versus number 8 seed, Sergeant Slaughter. Both of them, we said 6'7", 330 pounds, the Boss Man, versus the 6'6", 305 pound Sergeant Slaughter. These are 2 big boys going at it in a big spot. Mr. B, what say you?
Well, because he was trained by the greatest military force in the world, I'm going with Sergeant Slaughter. Ooh. Not only does he have his size, he's a sergeant, so he got promoted a couple times. Plus, he was always one of my favorites too. I think the G.I. Joe thing really stamped it in there for me, bud. But I liked Big Boss Man also, but Sergeant Slaughter for the win.
Sergeant Slaughter was one of those dudes that, for whatever reason, like his gimmick, especially when he was like against America. Remember, he turned heel and was against America for a while. And that was how they were going to.
I vaguely remember that.
Square off against Hulk Hogan at some point. But he was always one of those dudes that, for like, I loved it. He would call people puke. Remember, he's like, you're nothing, puke, or you're going to lose on Saturday, puke. I always thought that was funny that he called people puke. He was deceivingly big. You know what I mean? He was one of those dudes that when he was just on camera and not in the ring with anybody else, like he didn't, for whatever reason, he put off the perception to me that he wasn't that big. And then he would get in the ring and I'm like, this guy's a giant. But yeah, big size guy, mean as all get out. The Boss Man with Hard Times, though. Remember his shtick in the beginning was to get the stick. And if you at the end of the match, he would handcuff you to the turnbuckle and then beat you with a nightstick. And that
seems illegal, but
nobody wants to go out like that.
And here's the thing. This is what millennials don't understand, right? When we were children in the 80s, that was just called family fun entertainment. When you watched a grown man handcuff another man to the turnbuckle and beat him with a nightstick on Saturday night TV, and you cheered. You sat there, you cheered in your family room. And these kids these days, they just don't get it. They're too sensitive. They'll never understand. But Big Nick in a big spot going with a vote for the big boss man, Mark. You have the deciding vote. You have the deciding vote. I do not envy you, sir. Do not envy you.
This is tough, boys. We got the military versus the police force. I mean, that's the ultimate showdown. See, I was a fan of both of these guys, even though Big Boss Man was a little bit of a villain. And like you said, Sergeant Slaughter, I guess, kind of was too. Sergeant Slaughter definitely gets some points for the G.I. Joe, because I had the Sergeant Slaughter G.I. Joe. That was big.
You had one of those. The other figures too. He was remember they made him slightly larger than the other.
Exactly. A little more intimidating, even in the toy form.
Had a hell of a jaw, that Sergeant Slaughter.
You know what? That guy scared the shit out of me as a kid. I don't know if it ever faded. Man, this is a tough one.
That's why Mark never joined the mililary. He was too scared he'd run into Sergeant Slaughter.
Yeah.
That's right. I was close. This one is a 50-50 for me, because I do think that, like, if these guys wrestled 10 times, I could see like a 5-5. You know what I mean? I could see it going easily both ways, but I got to make a decision, and that's what I'm going to do, boys. And in my eyes, the Sergeant is the one that's going to bring home the bacon. Ooh. Sergeant Slaughter for the win.
Mark is right. So while Sergeant Slaughter was this ruthless tactician, don't forget the old boss man. He was similar to Bam Bam Bigelow, where he could move and he could scoot for a large dude, and he would come off of the turnbuckle too. It's nothing like seeing a 330-pound man dressed as a corrections officer coming off the top turnbuckle at you. All right. Fantastic. We got Sergeant Slaughter winning in a big spot, defeating the big boss man. Let's go back to the other side, where we will square off for the 7 seed versus the 10 seed. The winner, unfortunately, will have to face Andre the Giant. Our number 7 seed is none other than Jake the Snake Roberts.
Jake the Snake.
He will be squaring off against, this is really one for the animal community, animal loving community right here. He will be squaring off against what I think is one of the coolest nicknames ever, JYD, better known as the Junkyard Dog.
Junkyard Dog.
Marcus Sweetwater, give it to us, buddy. How do you see this one? In one corner, we have a tall guy with so he always had some kind of slimy hair going on. Jake the Snake. He was tough. He was strong. He did the DDT. Remember, the DDT was his finishing move, and he would have Damien in his bag of tricks there in the corner. And if things didn't go his way, he was happy to unleash the giant python snake in the middle of the ring to scare your ass out of there. But he's squaring off against a guy that does not fear easily. And I think the Junkyard Dog, I should look up his real name, but he played for
Ritter.
Correct me if I'm wrong. He played for the Green Bay Packers. Does that sound right?
Let's
Correct.
see. Yes.
Yeah. He played for the Green Bay Packers, and he used to put the chain around his neck like you would expect to see a dog guarding a junkyard. I don't know who's breaking into the junkyard that we need this violent dog protecting all the junk from, but he and then he would get down in the middle of the ring on all fours. Mm-hmm. Especially if he knocked your ass to the ground, and he would wait for you to try to get up, and then he would scoot over on all fours and headbutt you several times, keeping you on the mat. Yeah, he was a delight. He was a gem. All right, Mark.
Oh man,
what say you, Jake the Snake Roberts versus JYD the Junkyard Dog?
Yeah, so Junkyard Dog, I was a fan. Like you said, I love the pizzazz that he brought to the ring.
Showmanship.
A lot of showmanship. Always had a lot of upper body strength. I remember he was body slamming guys that were way bigger than he was. And you were like, this dude he's country strong. Now,
True.
Jake the Snake, that dude, I just felt like always wanted to sleep with my mom. Like he's like the dude. He's like the dude that, like, I guarantee you, like, how many little kids' moms did Jake the Snake sleep with as he traversed through the arena circuit?
Fathered many a bastard child. He does. You're right. He does.
He just gave off that like slimy used car salesman kind of vibe.
He looks like the guy the friend that you invite over. You think he's your friend. You invite him over to your home, and then he drinks all your beer and quietly, secretly kisses your wife in the kitchen when you're sitting on the couch.
Exactly.
Man, he's getting it on both sides.
But I will say this. Jake the Snake wasn't built like the traditional wrestler. He was tall and lanky, but he was deceivingly strong. Like he would body slam big dudes as well. Like there were plenty of times I'm like, man, he's going to get out muscled in this match. And I would just see him pick up a dude like it was nothing. He had that all guy strength.
Well, and he used to, I mean, you could tell he was ripped, but the gyrating hips was just a little too much for me as a kid. I'm like, why do I have to keep watching this dude? Like, remember he put his arms up behind his back and he just be like rotating his hips. And I'm like, this guy's weird. I'm like 8 years old. I'm like, this guy's creeping me out. I don't know what's happening right now.
The only time that Mark's mother watched wrestling was when Jake was,
that's right.
Mark would be sitting in front of the TV and she would be in the kitchen making up some gorp or whatever you guys eat. And she'd be like, hey now, Marky, you tell me if that Snake the Roberts comes on the TV. And
is there some wrestling on? I'm going to sit with you just for a minute.
And like a good son, he would always tell Mama when Jake the Snake made an appearance, and she would come and sit at the edge of the couch and eagerly watch, sipping her glass of white wine, Chardonnay, eagerly watching the Snake Roberts.
Yes, yes. So for that reason, and Jake the Snake also, like, a little dirty. Like, I don't know if I trust... You know, that he's not going to pull some dirty tricks out and that he's going to do something shady. But for that reason, not alone, for the previous mentioned reason, I'm going with the Junkyard Dog. Junkyard Dog for the win.
Fantastic. Junkyard Dog picking up a big vote from Mr. Mark and Mr. B. What say you, Junkyard Dog versus the Snake Roberts?
See, now I can't unhear what Mark said.
It's like embedded in your brain.
Yeah, like, because as a kid, I liked Jake the Snake. Now I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have liked him.
So, was your mother a fan as well?
No.
Not at all? Oh, that's just what she told Mr. B.
Right.
I don't like that stuff.
She wouldn't admit to it.
See, I think probably I would like Jake the Snake Roberts just because he had a snake, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool."
I mean, that was pretty slick.
I mean, like I was a little kid, so I was like, "He has a snake, cool." Yeah. But I mean, you're right, Junkyard Dog. I mean, I remember him having a lot more theatrics than other guys, even I thought at the time. Like, you know what I mean? He goes more over the top and not just like a regular wrestler, which I also thought was cool. But this is a tough one. I think this is one of those ones where if they wrestled 10 times, I think you're going to be 5-5.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, who sneaks the win in on the first fight or whatever? So I'm gonna throw a curveball. I'm gonna go with Jake the Snake Roberts for the win.
Let me correct myself here, because now that I'm thinking through this, I actually misspoke. I was describing the wrong person. I still stick with my choice.
You were describing Rick Rude.
Rick Rude is who I was thinking of.
Okay, now
because they both had the mustache, right? They both had the stash and
okay. Because I was when you were talking about the hips, I was like,
why am I
shaking his hips? But
yeah, then you brought up the snake, and I'm like, yeah, it's Jake the Snake. But either way, I still stick with my choice, Junkyard Dog. But I was a Jake the Snake fan, so sorry, Jake the Snake, for the slander.
Well,
I'll save that for Rick Rude.
Well, and that allows us to clear something up here, because I said of Jake Roberts that he strikes me as the kind of person that you would invite over to your house and he would drink all your beer and then secretly kiss your wife in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I said he looks like that guy.
He does. I mean,
to be clear, Rick Rude was that guy. Rick Rude would come over, drink all your beer, and
he would tell you about
maybe not even secretly kiss your wife. He would openly kiss your wife right in front of you, because he's a nasty, horrible individual, that Rick Rude. Also a member of the Heenan family. Do not trust anybody from the Heenan family.
Never would.
You know, as much as it hurts me, and look, this one's an interesting one to me because just size-wise, I think this would be a fantastic matchup, and their style as well. 6'3", 280 pounds, Junkyard Dog versus 6'6", 249 pound Jake Roberts, Snake Roberts. I'm going to go with Jake the Snake Roberts on this for a big win in the first round.
That's fair.
All right.
I can't argue with
ladies and gentlemen, the Snake advances. Let's go back to the other side of our bracket. That, for those of you scoring at home, this is the left side of the bracket, the left side. All right, where we will have number 5 squaring off against number 12. Let's go ahead and introduce to all of the beautiful listeners. What do you guys want to, who do you want introduced first? Number 12 or number 5?
Let's go 12.
All right. In the 12 seed, we have the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. So DiBiase is the adopted son of wrestler Iron Mike DiBiase. Sadly, his father died in the ring of a heart attack when Ted was 15 years old. DiBiase attended West Texas State University on a football scholarship. He was trained by Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk, who are wrestling legends in their own regard. He made his professional wrestling debut as a referee in 1974 and had ongoing feuds as a wrestler with Macho Man and Hulk Hogan, and even offered to buy the WWF Heavyweight Championship on more than one occasion. Remember when he tried to purchase, because he's the $1 million man, just purchase the belt. You don't even have to fight for it, just buy it.
No big deal.
So he was also the self-proclaimed $1 million champion. He was a 3-time WWF Tag Team Champion, and he's billed at 6 foot 1 inches tall, 260 pounds. And not that it means anything here today, but also one of Big Nick's absolute favorite wrestlers. I enjoyed the guy still to this day. And of course, he reminded us every chance he got that everybody has a price, and that certainly seemed to be correct. He's going to square off against the one and only Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Yes.
Ooh.
And this it all comes full circle here, ladies and germs. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was trained by wrestling great the Iron Sheik. His birth name is Richard Henry Blood Sr., who first wrestled under the ring name Dick Blood back in 1976.
That's a horrible name.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to go with Dick Blood.
Hey, how about Dick Blood for my ring name?
Richard.
All right. I guess
it is intimidating. I'll say that. It certainly is intimidating. But of course, they changed his name. They recommended that he change his name. He was later given the name of Ricky Steamboat because his resemblance to Hawaiian wrestler Sammy Steamboat. He held several belts in other wrestling outfits, but never in the WWF, having lost to the Macho Man for the Intercontinental belt in a match which many considered to be the greatest wrestling match of all time, Randy Savage versus Ricky Steamboat. Steamboat has been married 5 times, so it has been both a battle in and outside of the ring for Mr. Steamboat. He is billed at 5 foot 10 inches tall, 237 pounds. So he's the smallest of our wrestlers thus far. Mr. B, $1 Million Man at the 12 seed versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat at the 5 seed. What say you?
This is another tough one because I liked both of them very much, but I think I always would pull for the Dragon because he was a smaller guy. Plus, $1 Million Man was usually the bad guy. I'm going with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Ricky the Dragon.
Fantastic choice.
He's got dragon in his name. So, I mean, that just means that you're badass.
This one's incredibly difficult because I feel like different ends of the spectrum where early 80s, there was so many Steamboat fans out there, and then late 80s, the $1 Million Man was the guy that you kind of loved to hate. He was easy to dislike, but I really liked all of his antics, all his shenanigans he was always up to. Like he paired up with Andre the Giant regularly to try to beat Hogan and Macho Man. He was also responsible for the unveiling of The Undertaker as the mystery partner, the mystery guest at the Survivor Series. Nobody knew who the hell the Undertaker was until the $1 Million Man brought him into the Federation. And then later, another thing that he did, which was incredibly interesting, was after the successful movie No Holds Barred, the $1 Million Man was also responsible for bringing Zeus into the Wrestling Federation. And for all of those reasons,
wasn't it?
Debo,
right?
Friday.
Yeah, it was. Yep.
And for the reasons of him bringing all those big guys and always partnering up with these big giant monsters and behemoths, Big Nick's going to go with the $1 Million Man. Ted DiBiase is my.
We all knew you were going to Hollywood, Big Nick.
You knew it. You knew it.
So Hollywood.
Sweetwater Mark, the deciding
Nick,
vote.
He has that suit with all the cash on it. I've seen it.
I've seen him wear it.
He only pulls it out for like fancy events and but he's got one.
I too regularly get beat up by my bodyguard.
So for me, this one's actually kind of easy, only in the sense of I didn't like Ted DiBiase. I always thought that was to me, there was like the slimy bad guys, and that was the Rick Rudes of the world and the Ted DiBiase's and who was the manager, Bobby Hart with the megaphone. It was always like running around. He was the manager.
No, Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Well, I think he's combining two people. You're thinking of the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart.
Jimmy Hart. Thank you.
Jimmy Hart. The bullhorn. He would run around and get on the bullhorn and be like, "Come on, baby. Come on, baby.
Jimmy Hart.
Throw him in the rope, baby. Throw him out of the ring, baby. Come on."
Just like different people that as a kid, that villain side really stuck with me. You know what I mean? So yeah, I got to go with Ricky the Steamboat. He was high flying action and easy to root for, and Ted DiBiase was a douche.
It sounds like Mark's deciding factor on wrestlers that he liked was, could I bring him home to mom?
What is
at 8 years old? That's all I was thinking about.
What is their douche level on a scale of 1 to 10?
I got to protect my mom and this family.
No, I feel like Ted DiBiase, again, all these guys have talent. I'm not saying not talented, but you weren't like, whoa, that guy he's just like overwhelms you with athleticism and, just pure skill. It was like, no, I feel like he's going to do something dirty to win the match, and that's how he's going to win.
Well, I'll say this in defense of DiBiase. He was a very good wrestler. Like when you watch his moves compared to a lot, like somebody like the Ultimate Warrior who just runs around and constantly clotheslines people. Like DiBiase was more toward the, like Bret Hart type of wrestler where he could execute a wealth of, no pun intended, a wealth of maneuvers and strategies. The other thing about DiBiase too was it's difficult. Remember his finishing move was the $1 Million Dream. Slap you in the, as much as I liked the $1 Million Man, I always thought the dudes that had the sleeper hold or some version of the sleeper hold as their finishing move, I've always thought that was a little cheesy. Like it seemed like I always, you want somebody that's going to like slam your ass to the ground or suplex you or something really cool rather than slowly put you to sleep.
Yeah.
But the Dragon advancing in a big spot, Mark pushing him over the top. That's a fan favorite. He's a fan favorite.
He is. And I do want to clarify, when I say Ted DiBiase, he's a douche, I'm talking about the character. I'm not talking about the man himself.
Yeah, we're talking about characters. Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about characters, not the individuals, because we all know wrestling is real, right, guys?
It is real.
100%. So just want to make that clarification. A quick fun note because I know how much Mr. B loves fun facts.
Yep.
Ted DiBiase was trained by the Funk brothers, Terry Funk and Dory Funk Jr. So,
hey, get the funk out of my face.
Get the funk out of my face. Get the funk out of my face.
Yeah, you'll see. For those that follow wrestling that have a good knowledge of it back in the day, the old school ones anyway, that a lot of these dudes that were from like Texas or the Texas area, which I think $1 Million Man is from Oklahoma. A lot of those dudes that are from that part of the country were all trained by the Funks. Like the Funks are like a long running
kind of the
legacy in wrestling.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
To the other side we go. This for you scoring at home is the right side of our bracket. The right side of the bracket. where we have the 6 seed squaring off against the number 11 seed. And the 6 seed is the one and only the Hacksaw Jim Duggan. For those of you that have only watched wrestling a few times, he's the guy that walked down to the ring with the 2x4 on his shoulder, and he was not, just like the $1 Million Man would smack you in the face with the nightstick, he was also not afraid to beat a man with a 2x4 on live TV just for the fun and satisfaction of children all around America.
That's attempted murder.
That will get you a long stint in prison.
That will get you.
He's going to square off against maybe the most unique individual in today's tournament, George the Animal Steele. This was a man who was covered in hair with the exception of the top of his head. And he would go down to the ringside, and sometimes he would get in the ring, sometimes he wouldn't. So he would get counted out before the match even really started. And on some occasions, to celebrate a victory, he would eat the turnbuckle. He would eat the padding on the turnbuckle, which never looked appetizing to me, but yet he would return to it time and time again. He liked the taste of the padding on the turnbuckle, and he also had a fondness for Miss Elizabeth, the one-time manager of the Macho Man Randy Savage. All right, Mark, I don't think you're bringing home either of these guys to mom. Probably not. Definitely not George the Animal Steele. What say you, 6 seed Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus number 11 seed George the Animal Steele?
I'm gonna go with the Hacksaw Jim Duggan on this one. He kind of became the American boy a little bit, but he was always very flamboyant. That's not really the right word.
Entertaining.
Probably a little too over the top. He was just he's very entertaining is probably the best way to put it. Didn't always look like he was in the best shape. Looked like he might have drank a few Sixers, the nights before
the match. Before the match.
Yeah, I mean, right before the match.
Loosens you up.
It loosens you up a little bit. Plus, he had a rivalry with Ted DiBiase, so I think I ended up rooting for him a lot, as we just talked about, my feelings about Ted DiBiase. But yeah, I think, to me, Jim Duggan, and I remember when he got you guys remember when he got the crown and the cape that he used to wear?
Oh, yeah.
It was passed on from Bobby Heenan. That was you were talking about earlier, Mr. B. But yeah, I think to me, the Animal, he was definitely a little weird, the eating the turnbuckle thing, but I didn't feel like he was overly domineering,
skilled
for long periods of time. He was just more weird to me. So I'm going with the Hacksaw, Jim Duggan.
Oh, yeah. All right, Mr. B, what say you, Jim Duggan versus the Animal Steele?
I always thought Animal Steele was very intriguing, but Hacksaw Jim Duggan has a special place in my heart. So I'm going with the Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Mark basically said all the things why. Like I thought he was a really interesting, like hometown roots wrestler, especially again when you got $1 Million Man showing off all this money and Jim Duggan always got as a board.
Well, Jim Duggan was certainly like a crowd pleaser. He was easy to root for, easy to cheer for. The crowd loved him. I kind of thought he was a little basic. So he was always somebody that I cheered for. And I really liked when they would pair him up as a tag team or as a Survivor Series tag, 5-man tag, 4-man tag, where he would be paired up with some of my other favorite wrestlers. Cause I thought he was a good pairing. Where standalone, he didn't pique my interest so much. The Animal Steele was interesting and intriguing, but lacking when it came to ring presence. Well, I shouldn't say ring presence because he certainly had a presence, but the action inside the ring, he seemed to be a little limited. And for reasons that I stated earlier, where there were some matches where he would walk down, he would be introduced, and then he would never enter the ring, and thus the referee would count him out, and there was never even a battle that occurred. So he was always this guy that was he even fit to be a wrestler? Nobody really knew, but
hence the animal part. Maybe he was a little too out there.
Yeah.
He was like an animalistic human being, and therefore he wasn't great in the ring. And the other thing, the reason why I think the fans liked the Animal Steel was he was rare. You didn't see him all the time, right? You would rarely see him, so you'd be surprised, like, oh man, Animal Steel's fighting tonight. This is going to be weird and wacky. Let's give a quick shout out here. I want to say some accolades that we didn't discuss as far as Duggan goes, because he's kind of this happy-go-lucky, dim-witted guy in the ring, right? But he did do that move, which is sometimes called the spike, where it's really just looks like a football player running directly at you and slamming his shoulder into you and driving you to the floor, to the mat. I always thought that move was really cool. Jim Duggan was a letterman in high school at football, track, wrestling, basketball. And in wrestling, he was a New York State high school wrestling champion. He's the only one from his high school to become a state champion. And then listen to this. This is something that Mr. B did not know, that Jim Duggan was recruited by the Ohio State University to play football, but instead chose to play for Southern Methodist University and was later signed by the Atlanta Falcons. So another NFL player, and much to my surprise, he holds a bachelor's degree in applied plant biology. So good for him. He knows his plant.
Smart guy.
Very smart.
And he's very athletic.
Extremely athletic. And you know what I really love? I love when a really smart dude does not mind playing kind of a dumber guy as a character. I think it's always a neat move, because there's a lot of people out there that don't have the ego for that. So it's really cool that he's one of those types of dudes. Certainly a fan favorite, and he's advancing to the second round of our tournament. Jim Duggan.
Oh!
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, back to the left side of our tournament. This is the final bout of the first round of the left side of the bracket, where we have the number 4 seed squaring off against the number 13 seed. I'll let Mr. B choose. Who do you want to be introduced to ringside first, Mr. B? 13 or 4 seed?
4.
The 4 seed is the one and only Randy the Macho Man Savage. Born Randy Mario Poffo in Columbus, Ohio, his father, Angelo Poffo, was a well-known wrestler in the 1950s and 60s. Randy's brother is Leaping Lanny Poffo, better known as the Genius. Savage was actually married to his manager, Elizabeth, for 8 years. Randy was signed by the St. Louis Cardinals as a catcher out of high school. He played in the minor league, mostly for the Cardinals and the Cincinnati Reds farm systems. And then he broke into wrestling in 1973. He was both the Intercontinental Champion and World Champion in the WWF. He's billed, and this is probably a generous billing, but he's billed at 6'2", 237 pounds. And he's squaring off against the number 13 seed, who is the Honky Tonk Man.
Yes.
Honky Tonk Man, birth name Roy Wayne Ferris. And of course, he is from Tennessee. It's the only thing that would make sense. He is also the cousin of famed wrestler Jerry the King Lawler. Honky Tonk's 454-day reign as WWF Intercontinental Champion was the longest reign in the history of the title until it was broken in 2023. So he held that record for a very long time, billed at 6'1" tall, 243 pounds. And if you've never seen wrestling and have no idea who this guy is, he is basically a wrestling version of Elvis Presley.
Yep, that's it.
Big Nick's going to cast his vote right here first before we kick things off.
We all know who you're voting for.
Sweetwater, we're going to you after Big Nick. Who's Big Nick voting for?
We know it's Macho Man. You knew that before we even started.
Macho Man Randy Savage,
who I believe to be the greatest wrestler of all time, not just in the 80s, in the history of competition. Randy Savage gets my vote, but I will say this. I was a man who appreciated Honky Tonk Man. He's one of those dudes that, while he held that Intercontinental Championship for a very long period of time, he was one of those dudes that he didn't argue with the WWF. Like, he was the guy that was constantly putting guys over. Like, oh, you want to make a superstar out of that guy? You have him come and beat the Honky Tonk Man, and I'll let them beat me. As long as, just let me hang around in the match and put up a fight for a while. But after a while, I will let him beat me. Plus, his finishing move was aptly titled the shake, rattle, and roll, where he would he'd grab you, put your head down there next to his hip, and he'd put one hand on your hip and put the other on your tights, and he would wiggle his hips a little bit and then roll you over and slam you on your back. So the shake, rattle, and roll was a very cool move, but nothing's cooler than flying off the top turnbuckle at lightning quick speed, the Macho Man Savage dropping the big elbow, and also like to drop knees on people's backs and heads as well. So, and I was quite the fan of Elizabeth, as weren't we all. So Macho Man picking up a big vote from Big Nick. Sweetwater Mark, what say you?
So I like Honky Tonk. I was a fan. I enjoy the shtick with the Elvis kind of look-alike type thing.
This is where Mark decided he wanted to play guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was
Right when
actually
he saw-
the sole person that
The sole reason.
But with that being said, it's Macho Man Randy Savage. Come on. You got to go with Macho Man. I think he's going to be a tough one to beat down the stretch. So when you look at Macho Man in general, he's got all the accolades that you need, beyond the fact that in the ring, he was just a beast. Like, he was a beast, so to me, it's
hopped
Macho
up on Slim Jims.
on Princess Elizabeth. Yeah, it's definitely Macho Man all day long for sure.
Make that 3 for Macho Man. Landslide
Run
it.
the table.
All right. Macho coming up big in the first round. Let's go to the final bout of the right side of our bracket, where we have the 3 seed squaring off against the 14 seed. Mr. Sweetwater, who would you like introduced first, the 3 or 14 seed?
Give me the underdog.
The underdog coming in at the 14 seed. We have the one and only Roddy Piper. The Piper. Oh, man, the crowd would go. Remember, he started off as a bad guy, right? Yeah, everybody loved to hate the Piper. He was feuding against Hogan in the early 80s, and then he was feuding against Mr. T, and they would have boxing matches, Piper versus T. But then he flipped. He went from a heel and turned babyface and became a good guy. And oh, would that crowd go wild when they would hear those bagpipes a blaring, right? You would hear that music. The place would go dark and the bagpipes would kick in, and then you see him walking out. Also, the inspiration for the Korn song with the bagpipes.
Oh, yeah.
Chutes
That's
and
right.
Ladders. That's a little known fact that nobody knows because it's not true.
I believed you for a second there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounded like it had some truth to it, didn't it? He's going to square off against. Can you guys guess who's the missing guy from our tournament? So this is the only wrestler left that we've not introduced to the crowd yet.
There's a few, but I think they might be 90s, so I don't think
His theme song was a heavy metal sounding song with no lyrics. He's been mentioned at least once so far in this episode already.
Well, it's not Rick Rude.
If I had the theme song, I would play it for you right now. It is the Ultimate Warrior.
Ultimate
Not just
Warrior.
the regular warrior, the Ultimate
Not a regular.
Warrior. Squaring off against Piper in the first round. Sweetwater Mark. What do you think here, Lee?
All right, so I was definitely an Ultimate Warrior kid. He, again, probably not the most technically sound wrestler, but
He's the ultimate warrior.
he's the Ultimate Warrior. And that dude came running down the aisle, and you were like, shit's about to hit the fan. Like, somebody's about to get clotheslined over the ropes. But Roddy Piper was no slouch, man. I mean, he wasn't a pushover. He was like that tough dude that just like, you're like, I wouldn't want to face him at 2 a.m. in a bar when he's had a few beverages, a few cocktails. Scottish. But I got to go Ultimate Warrior. I think, to me, that dude was crazy. And I think the amount of energy he brought to the ring was tough for many people to match. So I'm going to Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, this one would be intriguing because both of them had one thing that they shared was they would both come out of the gate super on fire, right? The
Yep.
Piper would come out and he's just throwing fists left and right, and he looks like he's just like shot out of a cannon. And then the Warrior looked like the human version of the heavy metal song that was his theme song, where it's just like full charge, full go, 100% until 3 minutes later run out of wind.
It looked like methamphetamines is what it looked like.
Yes, that's right. And so this one would start off, I think, hot and heavy, and I don't think it would last particularly long because I think at some point the Warrior's probably just going to overpower Piper.
Mm-hmm.
And unless Piper can hit a bunch of shots to the face and head, which he was successful at doing with many a larger wrestler, but I tend to give this one to the Warrior as well. What say you, B?
So I was also a huge Ultimate Warrior fan, but Roddy Piper also was special. So
Yes, he was.
I'm going with, even though I think if they fought 10 times, it's probably going 8-2 Ultimate Warrior, but I'm going to give it to Roddy Piper. I think he's sneaky enough that he gets that one win when he needs it, and he's rocking a kilt. So there you go. But it clearly doesn't matter because you guys went Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, Roddy Piper is one of those dudes, billed as the Scottish fighter, but he's actually from Canada, and he too,
Saskatoon.
we forget that he too was a movie star as well. He starred in. I've seen the movie. I'm sorry, Piper, it was quite terrible, but yeah, he was a movie star as well. I used to love watching him fight Mr. T. That was always a treat when they would do their boxing matches. All right, that concludes the first round. It's been an action-packed round. We had people fighting people. There was animals fighting animals at some point. It got weird with the animal steel. We learned that Hacksaw Jim Duggan is the most educated man to ever grace the Wrestling Federation. It's just full of craziness, hysterics. Who knows what madness will be unveiled in the coming rounds. Round one, here are your winners. We have Hulk Hogan defeating the Iron Sheik. He will be squaring off against the Sergeant Slaughter, who defeated the Big Boss Man. We have, arguably, if they would have had a People's Champ back then, could have been a good recommendation for People's Champ. We have Ricky the Dragon Steamboat defeating the $1 Million Man. Mark wants everybody to know that nobody liked the $1 Million Man, especially him. Apparently I'm the only evil bastard in America that liked the $1 Million Man, but he's out of the tournament, and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat will face off against Randy the Macho Man Savage, who defeated the Honky Tonk Man. On the other side, we have the Ultimate Warrior, who defeated Piper. He will square off against Jim Duggan, who beat George the Animal Steel. Jake the Snake Roberts and his big nasty python advancing to the second round, defeating the Junkyard Dog. He will be squaring off against the one and only eighth wonder of the world, Andre the Giant, who beat a Bam Bam Bigelow. Thank you all to all of you wonderful big kids out there for joining us for round one of this very incredibly world. This holds so much importance as far as globally the outcome of this tournament. Everybody waiting on pins and needles, sitting on the edge of their seats.
World leaders
to figure out
listening in.
who was the greatest wrestler of the 1980s, WWF style, of course. Thanks for joining us this week. Make sure you join us again next week. And until then, this silliness that we just discussed here today, all just more proof that we are all simply big kids.